The dust devil spun across the desert floor just as Jesse Warner spotted the figure collapsed beside the old cattle trail. And something in his gut told him this discovery would change everything about his carefully ordered life. Jesse had been riding for 3 days straight from his small ranch outside Twin Falls, Idaho, heading toward Boise to sell the last of his cattle. The year was 1882, and times were harder than they had been in a long while. A brutal winter had taken most of his herd, leaving him with barely enough animals to make the journey worthwhile. His supplies had run dangerously low 2 days ago when his pack mule had spooked at a rattlesnake and bolted, taking most of his provisions with it. All he had left was a tin of beans and some hardtack that he had been saving for tonight's meal. The September sun beat down mercilessly as Jesse dismounted from his bay gelding, Thunder, and approached the figure. As he drew closer, he realized it was a woman, her clothing torn and dusty, her face pale beneath the grime. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with dark hair that had come loose from its pins and tumbled around her shoulders. Her dress, though dirty and damaged, had once been fine quality, suggesting she came from some wealth. Jesse knelt beside her, checking for signs of life. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and when he gently touched her shoulder, her eyelids fluttered open. The eyes that met his were a striking shade of green, reminiscent of the pines that grew in the mountains above Twin Falls. "Easy now," Jesse said softly, slipping his arm under her shoulders to help her sit up. "You are safe. My name is Jesse Warner. What happened to you?" The woman tried to speak, but her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. Jesse quickly uncapped his canteen and held it to her mouth, letting her take small sips. She drank greedily at first, but he pulled it back, knowing too much water too fast would make her sick. "Slow," he cautioned. "There is plenty more." After a few more careful sips, the woman's color began to improve slightly. She looked up at Jesse with those remarkable eyes, and he felt something shift in his chest, though he could not quite name it. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I thought I was going to die out here." "What is your name? How did you end up alone in the middle of nowhere?" "Nina," she said, then coughed. "Nina Palmer. I was traveling with a wagon train heading to Oregon. We were attacked 3 days ago, bandits. They killed the wagon master and several others. In the chaos, my horse bolted with me on it. I could not control her. She threw me about 2 miles back and ran off. I have been walking ever since, trying to find help." Jesse's jaw tightened. Bandit attacks had been increasing lately along the trail routes. The law was spread too thin to patrol all the remote areas effectively, and ruthless men took advantage of travelers. "Are you hurt?" "Besides the dehydration," Nina shook her head. "Bruised and scraped, but nothing serious. Just so hungry and tired." Jesse glanced back at Thunder, where his saddlebags held his last meal. He had been rationing carefully, knowing he still had 2 more days of riding before reaching Boise. If he gave Nina his food, he would have nothing until he reached town. But looking at her gaunt face and the way she trembled with weakness, he knew there was no real choice to make. "Come on," he said, helping her to her feet. She swayed, and he kept his arm around her waist to steady her. "Let me get you into some shade and find you something to eat." They made their way to a cluster of rocks that provided some shelter from the relentless sun. Jesse spread out his bedroll for Nina to sit on, then retrieved his saddlebags. He pulled out the tin of beans and the hardtack, along with his small cooking kit. Nina watched him with increasing concern as she realized these were his only supplies. "This is all you have. It will do," Jesse said, not meeting her eyes as he built a small fire. "You need it more than I do right now. I cannot take your food. You are traveling too. You need to eat." Jesse finally looked at her, and his brown eyes were kind but determined. Miss Palmer, you have not eaten in 3 days. I ate yesterday. There is no debate here. As the beans heated over the fire, Nina studied the cowboy who had saved her life. He was tall and lean, probably around 26 or 27, with sun-weathered skin that spoke of years working outdoors. His dark hair needed a cut, curling slightly at his collar, and a few days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. There was a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that made her feel safe despite their precarious situation. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Most men would not give up their last meal for a stranger." Jesse stirred the beans, watching the steam rise. "My mother used to say that how you treat people when it costs you something reveals who you really are. I would not be able to live with myself if I rode past someone in need, especially when I have the power to help." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman. Does she live in Twin Falls?" A shadow passed over Jesse's face. "She died 4 years ago. Fever took her one winter. My father followed 6 months later. I think he died of a broken heart more than anything else." "I am sorry," Nina said, genuine sympathy in her voice. "Thank you. They were good people. They taught me to do right by others, even when it is hard." He spooned the beans onto his one tin plate and handed it to her with a piece of hardtack. "Eat slowly. Your stomach is not used to food right now." Nina took the plate with trembling hands. "What about you?" "I will be fine. Please eat." As Nina ate, Jesse tended to Thunder and then refilled his canteen from the water skin, making sure they had enough water for the journey. He could hunt for food if necessary, though game had been scarce lately. Worst case, he would just go hungry until they reached civilization. He had done it before during lean times. When Nina finished eating, some color had returned to her cheeks. She handed the plate back to Jesse with a grateful smile. "Thank you. You saved my life. Where were you headed? Do you have family in Oregon?" Nina's expression grew complicated. "No family. I was engaged to a man in Portland, a merchant I met when he came through Philadelphia on business. We corresponded for 6 months and he proposed by letter. I sold everything I had to make the journey west to marry him. That is quite a leap of faith." "I thought so too. My parents died 2 years ago in a factory fire. I had been living with my aunt, but she remarried and her new husband made it clear I was not welcome. When Arthur, my fiancé, offered me a new life out west, it seemed like a gift from God." Her voice caught. "Now I do not know what to do. The wagon train is scattered. All my belongings are gone. I have no money, no way to continue to Oregon, and no way to go back east." Jesse sat down on a rock across from her, his mind working through the problem. "The first thing is to get you somewhere safe and fed properly. I am heading to Boise to sell my cattle. It is a 2-day ride from here. You can come with me. Once we get there, we can figure out your next steps. I have no way to pay you for your help. I am not asking for payment." Nina looked at him with wonder in her eyes. "I have never met anyone like you, Jesse Warner." He felt heat creep up his neck at her frank admiration. "I am just a simple rancher doing what any decent person would do." "You are wrong about that. Most people would not sacrifice their own well-being for a stranger. You gave me your only food, knowing you will go hungry because of it. That is not simple decency. That is extraordinary kindness." Jesse shifted uncomfortably, unused to such praise. "We should rest here for a few hours until the worst of the heat passes. Then we will ride into the evening when it is cooler. You can ride Thunder, and I will walk alongside. I cannot take your horse too. Thunder is strong enough to carry you. You are in no condition to walk 20 miles. It is settled." As they rested in the shade, they talked. Jesse learned that Nina had been a school teacher in Philadelphia, that she loved to raid, and that she had always dreamed of seeing the Western Territories. Nina learned that Jesse had inherited his parents' small ranch, that he raised cattle and horses, and that he had never been farther east than Cheyenne. "You ever get lonely out there on your ranch?" Nina asked. Jesse was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. Twin Falls is not very big, maybe 300 people. Most folks there are married with families. I keep busy with the work, but yes, there are times when I wish I had someone to share it all with." "Why have you not married?" "I came close once, about 3 years ago. Her name was Sarah. But when her father's store in Boise started doing well, she realized she wanted city life, not the hardship of ranching. She married a banker and moved to San Francisco. I have been focused on keeping the ranch going since then. This last winter nearly broke me. Lost most of my herd to the cold and lack of feed." "I am sorry. That must have been devastating." "It was hard," Jesse admitted, "but I still have the land and I have a dozen head left to sell. That money will buy breeding stock to start over. It will take time, but I will rebuild." Nina heard the determination in his voice and felt a surge of admiration. Here was a man who faced hardship with courage and did not give up. So different from Arthur, who had seemed impressive in his letters but whom she had never actually met in person. She realized with a start that she felt more connected to Jesse after a few hours than she had felt to Arthur after months of correspondence. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, they prepared to travel. Jesse helped Nina mount Thunder, making sure she was secure in the saddle. His hands were calloused but gentle, and Nina found herself noticing details about him. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the strength in his shoulders, the careful way he handled everything. They rode through the evening, Jesse leading Thunder by the reins while scanning the landscape for any threats. The desert gave way gradually to rolling hills dotted with sagebrush and juniper. As twilight painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Jesse found a sheltered spot near a small creek to make camp. "There is water here, and the rocks will hide our fire," he explained as he helped Nina down from the horse. "We should be safe for the night." Jesse unsaddled Thunder and let him drink from the creek, before hobbling him where he could graze on the sparse grass. He gathered wood and built a fire, though they had no food to cook. Nina watched him work with efficient, practiced movements, and she felt both grateful and guilty that he was going hungry because of her. "Jesse, there must be something we can do about food. Can you hunt?" "In the morning I will try. Rabbits are about, though they are skittish. I have my rifle, but I want to save the ammunition if possible. I set some snares downstream. If we are lucky, we will have something by sunrise." As darkness fell and the temperature dropped, they sat by the fire. Jesse gave Nina his jacket when he saw her shivering, despite her protests. The night sky stretched above them, brilliant with stars that seemed close enough to touch. "I never saw stars like this in Philadelphia," Nina said softly. "The city lights washed them out, but here they are magnificent." "My father used to say that God hung each star individually, like lanterns to light the way for lost travelers," Jesse said. "When I feel lost or overwhelmed, I look up and remember that there is order and purpose, even when I cannot see it." Nina turned to look at him across the fire. "You are a remarkable man, Jesse Warner. You have faced so much loss and hardship, yet you remain kind and hopeful. Most people would have become bitter." "Bitterness does not help anything grow," Jesse said simply. "I saw what it did to some of our neighbors who lost everything. They turned hard and mean, and it only made their lives worse. I decided I would rather struggle with hope than give up in despair." They talked late into the night, sharing stories and dreams. Nina told him about the books she loved, the students she had taught, the small joys of her life back east. Jesse described the beauty of Idaho in spring when wildflowers carpeted the hills, the satisfaction of working with horses, the peace of watching sunrise from his porch with a cup of coffee. As the fire burned low, Jesse insisted Nina take his bedroll while he sat up to keep watch. She was too exhausted to argue much, and within minutes of lying down, she fell into a deep sleep, feeling safer than she had since the attack on the wagon train. Jesse fed the fire and watched over her, marveling at how drastically his life had changed in a single day. He had set out on this journey alone, facing an uncertain future with his failing ranch. Now he had responsibility for another person, and strangely, instead of feeling burdened, he felt energized. Purpose had been kindled in him, something beyond mere survival. He found himself watching Nina as she slept, the way the firelight played across her features. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was an intelligence in her eyes, a warmth in her smile, and a strength in how she faced her dire circumstances without falling apart. She could have been hysterical or demanding, but instead she was gracious and concerned for his well-being even as he helped her. Morning came with the cry of a hawk circling overhead. Jesse checked his snares and was relieved to find he had caught 2 rabbits. It was not much, but it would provide enough meat to get them both to boys without complete starvation. He cleaned and prepared the animals while Nina woke and washed her face in the creek. They roasted the rabbits over the fire for breakfast, and Jesse insisted Nina take the larger portion. She had learned not to argue with him about such things, recognizing that his stubborn generosity was simply part of who he was. "This is the best meal I have ever eaten," Nina declared as she savored the simple roasted meat. Jesse laughed. "You must have been very hungry." "It is just rabbit cooked over an open fire. It is more than that. It is life. It is hope. It is proof that kindness exists in this harsh world." She met his eyes across the fire. "I meant what I said yesterday, Jesse. I have never met anyone like you." Jesse felt his heart skip in his chest. He had been trying not to think too much about the growing feelings he had for this woman he had just met, telling himself it was too soon, too impractical, too complicated. But the way she looked at him made something he had thought dead come back to life. They broke camp and continued their journey toward Boise. Nina rode Thunder again while Jesse walked alongside. The terrain grew more varied as they traveled, with the distant mountains becoming more prominent against the sky. They talked as they traveled, the conversation flowing easily between them. "Tell me about your ranch," Nina said. "What is it like?" Jesse's face lit up. "It is about 5 miles outside Twin Falls, nestled in a valley with a creek running through it. The house is small, just 4 rooms, but it is solid. My father and I built it together when I was 16. There is a barn, a corral, and about 300 acres of grazing land. When the grass is green and the horses are running free, it is the most beautiful place in the world." "It sounds wonderful. Do you work it alone?" "Mostly. During Roundup, I hire a couple of hands from town, but day to day it is just me. That is partly why losing so many cattle hurt so badly. I had put everything I had into building that herd. Years of work gone in one brutal winter." "But you will rebuild." "Yes. It will take time, maybe 5 years to get back to where I was, but I will do it. That land is all I have left of my parents. I cannot lose it." They traveled through the heat of the day, stopping periodically to rest and water the horse. As evening approached, they crested a hill and saw Boise spread out in the valley below. It was not a huge city, but after days in the wilderness, it looked like civilization itself. "We will make it before full dark," Jesse said with relief. "There is a decent hotel near the stockyards, Mrs. Henderson's place. I know her a bit. She is a widow who runs a respectable establishment. You can get a hot meal and a real bed tonight." "Jesse, I told you I have no money. I cannot pay for a hotel room. I will cover it until we figure things out." I should get a decent price for my cattle, enough to see us both through for a while. Us both. Jesse, I cannot keep taking from you. You have done so much already." Jesse stopped walking and looked up at her. "Nina, I am going to be honest with you. I know we have only known each other for 2 days, but I care about what happens to you. I do not want to just drop you off in boys and disappear. I want to make sure you are safe and have real options before I leave. If that makes me overly forward or presumptuous, I apologize, but that is how I feel." Nina looked down at him, her throat tight with emotion. "You are not presumptuous. You are the most honorable man I have ever met. I care about you too, Jesse, more than I probably should after such a short time." Their eyes held for a long moment, something unspoken but powerful passing between them. Then Jesse cleared his throat and resumed walking. "We should get moving. I want you in a real bed tonight." They reached boys as the last light faded from the sky. The town was busy with evening activity, saloons bright with lamplight, people moving along the wooden sidewalks. Jesse led them to Henderson's hotel, a neat 2-story building with clean white curtains in the windows. Mrs. Henderson herself answered their knock, a plump woman in her 50s with shrewd but kind eyes. She took in Nina's bedraggled appearance and Jesse's protective stance beside her with a knowing look. "Jesse Warner, it has been some time since you stayed here. And who might this young lady be?" "This is Miss Nina Palmer, Mrs. Henderson. She was attacked by bandits and left stranded. I found her 2 days ago. She needs a room and some hot food. I need to stable my horse and get my cattle to the stockyards in the morning." Mrs. Henderson's expression softened. "Come in, both of you. Miss Palmer, you look dead on your feet. I will have my girl draw you a hot bath and bring up a meal. Jesse, your usual room is available." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Just one thing. Miss Palmer has lost all her belongings. She will need some clothes and necessities. I will settle up the bill tomorrow after I sell my cattle. Of course, I have some things that should fit her well enough. Come along, dear." As Nina followed Mrs. Henderson upstairs, she looked back at Jesse. "Thank you," she mouthed. He tipped his hat to her, his heart full. After seeing Nina settled, Jesse took Thunder to the livery stable and arranged to have his cattle brought in from where they were grazing outside town. The stockyard manager agreed to look at them first thing in the morning. Then Jesse returned to the hotel, where Mrs. Henderson had a meal waiting for him. "That is quite a girl you found out there," Mrs. Henderson said as she set a plate of stew before him. "She is remarkable," Jesse agreed, too tired and hungry to pretend otherwise. "What are your plans? You cannot mean to just leave her here alone." Jesse pushed his stew around with his spoon. "I do not know yet, Mrs. Henderson. I only know I cannot abandon her." The older woman smiled knowingly. "I have seen that look before, Jesse Warner. You have fallen for her. Is it that obvious as the sunrise? Does she feel the same?" "I think so, but it is complicated. She was engaged to a man in Oregon, and even if that is no longer happening, she is an educated city woman. What could I offer her? A struggling ranch and a life of hard work." Mrs. Henderson sat down across from him. "You underestimate yourself, Jesse. You are a good man with a good heart. That is worth more than all the money in San Francisco. If she has any sense, she will see that." Jesse finished his meal and retired to his room, but sleep came slowly. He kept thinking about Nina, wondering what she was thinking, what she would decide to do. He had no right to ask her to consider a life with him. They had known each other for such a short time. And yet, he could not imagine just riding away and never seeing her again. Down the hall, Nina lay in the first real bed she had experienced in weeks, clean and fed and safe. But her mind was racing. Everything had changed so quickly. A week ago, she was nervously heading toward Oregon to marry a man she had never met, hoping for security and a new start. Now that plan lay in ruins, but strangely, she did not feel devastated. Instead, she felt liberated. Meeting Jesse had shown her what she had been missing in her correspondence with Arthur. There had been no real connection, just the idea of security, of being wanted by someone. But with Jesse, even after just 2 days, there was real connection. She felt seen and valued, not for what she could provide, but simply for who she was. She thought about his face in the firelight, the strength in his hands, the kindness in his eyes. She thought about his ranch in Idaho, the life he described. It was not the life she had imagined for herself, but she found herself wanting it more than she had wanted anything in a long time. But what if she was being foolish? What if these feelings were just gratitude and the intensity of their shared experience? What if Jesse was just being kind and did not actually want her to stay? She had no money, no skills useful for ranch life. She would be a burden to him when he was already struggling. Morning came too quickly. Jesse rose early and headed to the stockyards to sell his cattle. The bidding was decent, and he managed to get a fair price for his small herd. It was not as much as he had hoped, but it was enough to buy breeding stock and supplies to last the winter. He returned to the hotel to find Nina dressed in a simple calico dress that Mrs. Henderson had provided. Her hair was clean and pinned up, and even in borrowed clothes she was lovely. "Good morning," she said, her voice uncertain. "Good morning. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in weeks. Jesse, we need to talk about what happens next." They sat in the hotel's small parlor, away from other guests. Jesse turned his hat in his hands, suddenly nervous. "I sold the cattle this morning," he said. "Got a decent price, enough to cover your stay here for a week or two while you figure out your plans." "That is generous, but Jesse, I have been thinking all night. I need to contact Arthur in Portland, let him know what happened, and see if he still wants me to come. Or I could try to earn enough money to return to Philadelphia, though I do not know what I would do there. Or—" She trailed off. "Or what?" Jesse asked quietly. Nina met his eyes. "Or I could stay in Idaho. Maybe find a teaching position in Twin Falls or another nearby town. Start over here." Jesse's heart leaped, but he forced himself to stay calm. Twin Falls does have a schoolhouse. The teacher they had last year moved away when she got married. I do not know if they have filled the position yet. Would you mind if I stayed in the area? I do not want to presume anything or make you uncomfortable. I know we barely know each other, but I feel drawn to this place, to this life." She paused, then added softly, "To you." Jesse set down his hat and reached for her hand. "Nina, I was awake half the night trying to figure out how to ask you to consider staying without sounding like a crazy person. We have only known each other a few days, but I have never felt this way about anyone, not even Sarah. When I think about riding back to the ranch alone, leaving you behind, it feels wrong. But I do not want to pressure you or make you feel obligated because I helped you. You are not pressuring me. I want to stay. I want to see where this could go between us. But Jesse, I have to be honest. I do not know anything about ranch life. I cannot ride well. I have never cooked over an open fire. I would probably be useless at most of the work you do. What if I stay and you realize I am not suited for this life?" Jesse squeezed her hand gently. "What if you stay and discover you love it? What if we are both worrying about problems that might never happen? I think we should take this one step at a time. First, let us go to Twin Falls and see about that teaching position. You can stay at Mrs. Miller's boarding house. She rents rooms to single women and it is respectable. That gives you your own place and income. Then we can get to know each other properly with time and no pressure." "That sounds wonderful," Nina said, relief flooding through her. "But Jesse, I still have nothing. No clothes besides what Mrs. Henderson gave me, no money, no way to pay for travel or first month's rent or anything. I have enough from the cattle sale to cover those things." Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better. You can pay me back once you are working." "Why are you doing all this for me?" Jesse was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because when I found you out there in the desert, something in my life shifted. I have been going through the motions for the past few years, just surviving, not really living. Meeting you woke something up in me. Whether this becomes a friendship or something more, I know I am supposed to help you. It feels right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time." Nina felt tears prick her eyes. "I feel the same way. Like God put me on that runaway horse and dropped me in your path for a reason." They spent the rest of the day making preparations. Jesse bought Nina some basic clothing and necessities. They sent a telegram to Arthur in Portland, explaining that Nina had been in an attack and would not be continuing to Oregon. The reply came back within hours, surprisingly brief and unemotional. Arthur expressed relief that she was safe, but agreed it was probably for the best that they not proceed with marriage plans. He wished her well. "I am embarrassed by how little that hurts," Nina admitted to Jesse as they sat over dinner that evening. "I think I was in love with the idea of being chosen, of having a place to go, more than I was in love with him." "That is understandable given your circumstances. You were alone and grieving. You wanted security. What I wanted was to matter to someone, to be seen and valued." She looked at Jesse across the table. "You made me feel that way from the moment you found me. You did not help me because you wanted something from me. You did it simply because it was right." The next morning, they set out for Twin Falls. Jesse had used some of his cattle money to buy a gentle mare for Nina named Daisy, so they could travel together more easily. The journey took 2 days, and they camped one night under the stars, talking by the fire until late. "Tell me about your students back in Philadelphia," Jesse said. "What did you teach them?" Nina's face brightened. "I taught reading, writing, and arithmetic to children aged 6 to 12. Some of them came from wealthy families, but others were quite poor. I tried to treat them all the same, to give each child the education they deserved regardless of their circumstances. That must have been rewarding." It was. Watching a child's face light up when they suddenly understood how letters formed words, or when they solved a difficult problem, those were the best moments. I miss it. Hopefully, you will get to experience that again in Twin Falls. The children there deserve a good teacher. As they drew closer to his home territory, Jesse began pointing out landmarks. "That mountain there is where I hunted my first deer with my father. That creek is where my mother used to take me fishing. Beyond that ridge is where my property starts." Nina could hear the love in his voice when he spoke of this land. It was part of him in a way she was only beginning to understand. They reached Twin Falls in the afternoon of the second day. The town was small but tidy, with a main street lined with businesses, a church with a white steeple, and scattered houses spreading out into the surrounding countryside. People on the street waved to Jesse, clearly knowing him. He led her directly to Mrs. Miller's boarding house, a large Victorian home on the edge of town. Mrs. Miller was a tiny woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "Jesse Warner, what brings you to my door?" she asked. "Mrs. Miller, this is Miss Nina Palmer. She is a teacher from Philadelphia looking for a position here in Twin Falls. I was hoping you might have a room available for her." Mrs. Miller looked Nina up and down assessingly. "A teacher, you say? Do you have references?" "I am afraid I lost everything in a bandit attack, Mrs. Miller," Nina explained. "But I taught for 3 years at a private school in Philadelphia. I can write to them for references if needed." "A bandit attack? Good heavens! How did you end up here?" "Jesse found me and helped me," Nina said simply. Mrs. Miller's expression softened slightly as she looked between them. "I see. Well, as it happens, I do have a room available. The previous tenant just married and moved out last week. As for teaching, you will need to speak with Mayor Harris. He handles such things. But I should warn you, they have been looking for a teacher for 2 months and have not found anyone suitable. The position does not pay much, and living out here is not easy. I understand, Nina said. I am willing to work hard. Very well. Come in and I will show you the room. Jesse, you can wait in the parlor. The room was small but clean, with a window overlooking a garden, a narrow bed, a dresser, and a washstand. It was simple, but after her recent experiences, it looked like luxury to Nina. I will take it, she said immediately. Thank you, Mrs. Miller. After settling on terms and having Jesse pay the first month's rent, Mrs. Miller showed them back out. The mayor's office is in the town hall, 2 blocks down. You might catch him before he leaves for the day. Mayor Harris turned out to be a balding man in his 50s with a friendly demeanor. He was delighted to hear that Nina was an experienced teacher and conducted an impromptu interview right there in his office. Nina answered his questions about teaching methods, classroom management, and curriculum with confidence born of real experience. Miss Palmer, I would like to offer you the position, Mayor Harris said. The pay is $40 a month and the term runs from September through May. You would have about 20 students of varying ages. The schoolhouse is small but adequate. Can you start next week? Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Mayor Harris. As they left the town hall, Nina felt like she was walking on air. I have a job, a real job. I can support myself. Jesse grinned at her excitement. You did that all on your own. I am proud of you. I could not have done any of it without you, Jesse. You gave me the chance to get here. They walked back toward Mrs. Miller's boarding house, neither quite ready to say goodbye yet. As they stood on the porch, the sun setting behind the mountains, Jesse took both her hands in his. Nina, I know we are taking this slow, but I want you to know that my feelings for you are real. I would like to court you properly if you are willing. I can come into town on Sundays after church. We could spend time together, get to know each other better. Nina smiled up at him. I would like that very much. But Jesse, you should know that my feelings are real too. I am not just grateful. I am genuinely falling in love with you. Jesse's breath caught. You are. Yes, I have been fighting it, telling myself it is too soon, that I am being foolish. But my heart knows what it knows. You are a good man, Jesse Warner, and I would be honored to be courted by you. Jesse pulled her into his arms, holding her close. I am falling in love with you too, he whispered against her hair. From the moment I saw you lying in the dust, something in me knew you were important. I just did not realize how important. They stood there holding each other as twilight deepened around them, both feeling that they had found something precious and rare. Over the following weeks, they settled into a pattern. Nina threw herself into teaching, and the children of Twin Falls adored their new teacher. She was patient but firm, creative in her methods, and genuinely interested in each student's progress. The parents were impressed, and word spread that the town finally had a really good teacher. Jesse came to town every Sunday without fail. After church services, he and Nina would walk together, exploring the area around town, talking endlessly about everything and nothing. He showed her the places that were special to him, and she shared her dreams for her students and her new life. One Sunday in late October, Jesse brought a picnic lunch and took Nina out to see his ranch for the first time. As they crested the last hill and the valley spread out before them, Nina gasped, "Oh, Jesse, it is beautiful." The ranch house sat nestled against a hillside, with the creek Jesse had mentioned sparkling in the sun as it wound through the property. The barn was weathered but solid, and the surrounding land was exactly as he had described, a patchwork of autumn colors. They rode down to the house and Jesse helped her dismount. "I know it is not much," he said, suddenly nervous about showing her his home. "It is wonderful," Nina said firmly. She walked through the small house, taking in the simple furniture, most of it handmade, the stone fireplace, the books on a shelf, the clean but sparse kitchen. "I can see you here, it suits you." "Could you see yourself here?" Jesse asked quietly. Nina turned to face him. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking me?" Jesse took her hands. "We have been courting for 6 weeks. I know it is not long by conventional standards, but Nina, I am certain about my feelings. I love you. I want to marry you and build a life with you here. I know the timing might seem rushed, but when you are certain about something, waiting does not change anything. Jesse, are you sure? Marrying me means taking on someone who does not know the first thing about running a ranch. I will make mistakes. I will probably be more trouble than help at first. Marrying you means sharing my life with my best friend. It means waking up every day next to the woman I love. Everything else we can figure out together." He paused. "But I will understand if you need more time or if you have doubts." "I do not want to pressure you." Nina felt tears streaming down her face. "I do not have doubts, Jesse. I love you. Yes, I will marry you." Jesse whooped with joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her for the first time, gentle and sweet and full of promise. They decided to marry before Christmas, giving them 2 months to prepare. Nina would finish out the fall term at school, and they would find a replacement teacher for the spring. Some people in town whispered that they were moving too fast, but most who knew Jesse and had gotten to know Nina were happy for them. Mrs. Miller became Nina's unofficial advisor on all things ranch-related. "You will need warm clothes for winter," she instructed. "And you should learn to preserve food, to cook on a wood stove, to tend a kitchen garden. Come to my house every afternoon after school, and I will teach you what you need to know." Nina threw herself into learning with the same dedication she brought to teaching. She learned to make bread and preserves, to mend clothes, to manage a household budget. Mrs. Miller was a patient teacher, and Nina proved an apt student. Jesse spent his time preparing the ranch house for his bride. He bought a new stove, repaired loose boards, made curtains for the windows with help from some of the church ladies. He was determined that Nina would have a comfortable home. On a crisp December morning 2 weeks before Christmas, Jesse Warner and Nina Palmer were married in the Twin Falls Church. Nina wore a simple dress of cream-colored wool that she had made herself with Mrs. Miller's help. Jesse wore his best suit, his hair neatly trimmed, looking happier than anyone in town had ever seen him. Mayor Harris gave Nina away, and Mrs. Miller stood up as her witness. Half the town crowded into the little church to celebrate with them. As the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Jesse looked into Nina's eyes and saw his whole future there. The reception was held in the church hall, with food contributed by what seemed like every family in town. There was music and dancing and so much joy. As Jesse waltzed Nina around the floor, she whispered, "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever imagined I could be," he replied. "You, more than words can say." 6 months ago, I was alone and frightened, heading toward an uncertain future with a stranger. Now I am married to my best friend, about to start a life I actually want. It feels like a miracle. "You are my miracle," Jesse said, pulling her close. "The best thing that ever happened to me." They spent their wedding night in the ranch house, finally alone as husband and wife. Jesse had built up a roaring fire in the fireplace, and the house was warm and welcoming. They talked late into the night, making plans for their future, dreaming about the life they would build together. "I want children someday," Nina said, curled up against Jesse's side. "At least 2 or 3, maybe more. I want that too. This house is too quiet with just me in it. I want it full of life and love and laughter." "What should we do first?" For the ranch, I mean. Jesse thought about it. In the spring, I will use the rest of the cattle money to buy breeding stock. We start small and build slowly. It will be hard work, but we will make it succeed. I am not afraid of hard work. And Jesse, you are not alone anymore. We will do this together. The winter was harsh, as Idaho winters tended to be, but the ranch house was warm and Jesse and Nina were happy. Nina learned ranch life gradually, under Jesse's patient instruction. She learned to milk the cow they had bought, to feed chickens, to ride Daisy with more confidence. She was not naturally skilled at ranch work, but she was determined and she learned. Jesse discovered that having a partner transformed the work. Nina helped with the chores, but more than that, she was someone to share meals with, to talk to at the end of a long day, to make plans with. The loneliness that had been his constant companion for years disappeared completely. They celebrated their first Christmas together quietly, just the two of them. Jesse carved Nina a jewelry box from pine wood, spending hours making it perfect. Nina knitted him a thick sweater in dark blue, working on it secretly in the evenings while he tended the animals. "I never had a Christmas this perfect," Nina said as they sat by the fire on Christmas Eve. "It is not about gifts or fancy food. It is about being with someone who loves you." "Every day with you is a gift," Jesse replied, meaning every word. In February, Nina realized she was pregnant. She was both thrilled and terrified, unsure if she was ready to be a mother. Jesse was overjoyed, already making plans for a cradle and thinking about adding a room onto the house. "What if I am terrible at it?" Nina worried. "You are a wonderful teacher who loves children. You will be an amazing mother," Jesse assured her. "And I will be right there with you, learning as we go." Spring came with its rush of new life. Jesse bought 6 heifers and a bull with the last of his cattle money, the foundation of their new herd. He also bought 2 more horses, planning to breed them. The work was constant and exhausting, but they tackled it together. Nina's pregnancy progressed well, though she tired more easily. Jesse insisted she rest more, taking on extra work himself. "You are growing our baby," he said. "That is the most important work there is right now." In early September, almost exactly a year after Jesse had found Nina in the desert, she went into labor. Mrs. Miller came out to the ranch to help along with the town's midwife, Mrs. Chen. Jesse paced outside, nervous and praying until he heard the sharp cry of a newborn. Mrs. Miller opened the door with a smile. "You have a son, Jesse, a healthy baby boy, and Nina is doing fine." Jesse rushed inside to find Nina exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. "Meet your son," she said softly. Jesse looked down at the baby's tiny face and felt his heart expand in ways he did not know were possible. "He is perfect. You are perfect." They named him Jacob Thomas Warner, Jacob after Jesse's father and Thomas after Nina's. Little Jacob had his mother's green eyes and dark hair, and he was loud and healthy from the start. The years that followed were full and rich. Jesse's herd grew steadily as he proved to be a skilled cattleman. Nina balanced motherhood with helping on the ranch, discovering that she was stronger and more capable than she had ever imagined. 2 years after Jacob was born, they welcomed a daughter, Lucy Grace, who had Jesse's brown eyes and her mother's smile. The children grew up surrounded by love and the wide, open spaces of Idaho. Jacob proved to be a natural with animals, following his father everywhere as soon as he could walk. Lucy was more interested in books and learning, taking after her mother. Jesse and Nina's love deepened with each passing year. They faced challenges, hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and tight money, but they faced everything together. They never forgot those early days when Jesse had given his only meal to a starving stranger, the moment that had changed both their lives forever. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jesse took Nina back to the spot where he had found her. They stood there holding hands, looking out at the desert landscape. If someone had told me that day that I would find the love of my life lying in the dust on a cattle trail, I would not have believed them, Jesse said. If someone had told me that losing everything would lead me to everything I ever really wanted, I would have thought them crazy, Nina replied. But here we are. Here we are, Jesse agreed, pulling her close. With 2 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, and a love I treasure more than anything else in this world. You remember what I said that first day, after you gave me your food, Jesse smiled. You said I was the most extraordinary person you had ever met, that my kindness was remarkable. I meant every word, and every day since has only proven it more true. You are the best man I know, Jesse Warner. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life. They kissed there in the desert as the sun set, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built a life full of love and meaning. The ranch continued to prosper over the years. Jesse's reputation as an honest dealer and skilled rancher grew, and the Warner Ranch became known as one of the best in the region. Nina occasionally taught children of ranch hands and neighbors in their home during winter months, unable to fully give up her love of teaching. When Jacob turned 18, he took over much of the daily running of the ranch, showing the same dedication and skill his father had. Lucy went to teachers' college in Boise and came back to teach at the Twin Falls School, just as her mother had. As Jesse and Nina grew older, they spent more time simply enjoying each other's company, taking long rides across their land, sitting on their porch watching sunsets, visiting with their children and eventually their grandchildren. On their 40th wedding anniversary, surrounded by family, Mayor Harris, now quite elderly himself, gave a toast. 40 years ago, Jessie Warner brought a stranger to town and told me she needed a teaching job. I knew even then that there was something special between them. Their love story has been an inspiration to this whole community. They have shown us what real love looks like, built on sacrifice, kindness, and unwavering commitment to each other. Jesse and Nina looked at each other across the table, still seeing in each other's eyes the young people they had been when fate had brought them together on a dusty trail. Late that night, as they lay in bed in the house Jesse had built so many years ago, Nina said, "I have been thinking about that moment when you offered me your only meal. You were hungry yourself. You were struggling. You had every reason to pass me by or to share grudgingly. But you gave freely and fully, without hesitation. That moment revealed who you truly were, and it made me fall in love with you before I even understood what I was feeling." Jessie stroked her hair, still dark but now streaked with silver. "I think I fell in love with you in that moment too. I just did not recognize it yet, but my heart knew. When I saw you lying there, something in me said this person matters. This person is important to your future, and that feeling has never once been wrong." "If you had the chance to go back and change anything, would you?" Nina asked. "Not a single thing. Every moment, the good and the hard, led us to this life. I would not trade 1 second of it." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, just as they had done for 40 years, still deeply in love, still grateful for the chance meeting that had changed everything. Jacob and his wife, along with Lucy and her husband, continued to live near the ranch, keeping the Warner legacy alive. Jesse and Nina's grandchildren played in the same creek where Jesse had played as a boy, rode horses across the same hills, learned the same values of hard work and kindness. Jesse and Nina lived to see their great-grandchildren born, tiny babies who would grow up hearing the story of how their great-grandfather found their great-grandmother dying in the desert and saved her life by giving her his last meal. It became a family legend, passed down through generations. A reminder that one act of selfless kindness can change not just two lives but create ripples that spread out across decades. When Jesse was 72, he took Nina out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a hill that overlooked their entire property. They sat together on the bench he had built there years ago, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "This has been a good life," Jesse said, his hand entwined with Nina's. "The best life," Nina agreed. "Better than anything I could have dreamed. Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently, if I had not come along that road that day? If you had made it to Oregon?" Nina shook her head. "No, because I believe we were meant to find each other. Call it fate, call it God's plan, call it whatever you want, but I think our paths were always meant to cross. You were always going to be the man who saved me, and I was always going to be the woman who changed your life. You did change my life. You took a lonely, struggling rancher and gave him purpose, love, family, everything that matters. You made me happier than I knew it was possible to be. You did the same for me. You showed me what real love looks like. You taught me strength I did not know I had. You gave me a home and a family and a life filled with meaning." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky turned brilliant shades of orange and pink. Around them, the ranch buzzed with live cattle lowing in the distance, horses nickering in the barn, their children and grandchildren moving about their own homes on the property. "We built something lasting," Jesse observed. "Not just the ranch, but a family that knows how to love, how to work hard, how to treat people with kindness and dignity. That legacy matters more than any amount of money or success." "You sound like your mother," Nina said with a smile. "She would be so proud of the man you became, the family you built." "I hope so. I hope both my parents would be proud. They taught me well, and I tried to pass those lessons on to our children." As twilight deepened, they walked slowly back to the house, arms around each other, still as connected as they had been on that first night by the campfire when they had talked under the stars and felt the first stirrings of love. The seasons continued to turn. Jesse and Nina celebrated 50 years of marriage with a huge party that drew people from all over Idaho, friends and family and business associates who had known them over the decades. The governor himself sent a congratulatory letter, praising their contributions to Idaho ranching and education. But for Jesse and Nina, the real celebration was in the quiet moments, the morning coffee shared on the porch, the evening walks around their property, the nights spent talking about memories and dreams and everything in between. When Jesse turned 79, his health began to decline. Years of hard ranch work had taken their toll on his body, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Nina never wavered. Nina cared for him tenderly, just as he had once cared for her when he found her dying in the desert all those years ago. On a warm September evening, 57 years to the day after he had found Nina, Jesse passed away peacefully in his sleep, Nina's hand in his. The whole town mourned his loss. Jesse Warner had been more than a successful rancher, he had been a pillar of the community, a man whose integrity and kindness had touched countless lives. Nina grieved deeply, but found comfort in her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Jacob took full ownership of the ranch, running it with the same skill and ethics his father had instilled in him. Lucy continued teaching, inspiring students just as her mother had. Nina lived for another 8 years, spending her time with family, writing down memories of her life with Jesse so that future generations would know their story. She finally passed away at 87, surrounded by her loved ones, her last words being Jesse's name. They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the ranch, the spot where they had spent so many evenings watching sunsets together. Their headstone bore a simple inscription: Jesse and Nina Warner, their love changed everything. The ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, always called the Warner Ranch, always remembered as the place built by two people whose chance meeting in the desert had led to a love story for the ages. Jacob's son eventually wrote a book about his grandparents' story, and it became something of a local legend. Tour groups would sometimes stop by the ranch, wanting to see where the famous Jesse and Nina had lived and loved. The family always graciously showed them around, proud of their legacy. The spot where Jesse had found Nina was marked with a simple stone monument years later, placed there by their children. It read, "Here, Jesse Warner found Nina Palmer, September 1882. Their love story began with one act of selfless kindness. May we all be so generous." The creek that ran through the ranch property was officially named Warner Creek in their honor. The school in Twin Falls had a wing dedicated to Nina's memory, recognizing her contributions to education in Idaho. But beyond the monuments and memorials, Jesse and Nina's real legacy lived on in their descendants, who carried forward their values of hard work, integrity, kindness to strangers, and unwavering commitment to family. Every Warner child grew up hearing the story of how their great or great-great-grandparents had met, and the lesson was always the same: one person's choice to show compassion can change not just one life, but generations of lives. The ranch continued to thrive well into the 20th century, adapting to new technologies and methods but never losing sight of the foundation Jesse had built: honest dealing, quality stock, and respect for the land. It became one of the most successful family ranches in Idaho, proof that Jesse's dream of rebuilding after that devastating winter had not just succeeded but flourished beyond anything he could have imagined. On the centennial anniversary of Jesse finding Nina, the entire Warner family gathered at the ranch for a massive reunion. Over 200 people came, all descended from Jesse and Nina, all carrying forward pieces of their legacy. They held a ceremony at the monument marking the spot where it all began, and each person shared what Jesse and Nina's love story meant to them. Jacob's grandson, also named Jesse, spoke for the whole family. "What my great-great-grandfather did that day in the desert, giving his only meal to a dying stranger, defined not just his life but all of our lives. He could have ridden past. He could have helped grudgingly. Instead, he gave freely and completely, and in return, he found love, purpose, and happiness beyond measure. That is the legacy he and Nina left us: that real love requires sacrifice, that kindness matters, that the choices we make in crucial moments define who we are." As the sun set over the ranch that evening, the whole family stood together on the hill where Jesse and Nina were buried, looking out at the land that love had built. In that moment, every person there understood what Jesse and Nina had known from their very first meeting: that love is not just a feeling but a choice, made every day, in countless small actions that add up to a lifetime of devotion. The story of Jesse and Nina Warner became more than just a family legend. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the importance of staying true to your values, and the beautiful things that can happen when two people commit to building a life together through whatever challenges come their way. Their love story, born from one simple act of kindness on a dusty desert trail, created a legacy that spanned generations and touched thousands of lives, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with nothing more than one person choosing to help another in their moment of desperate need.